Bring your awareness down from your breath, from your heart, from your head, down to your hips. Ground into the earth that connects us all. Does anyone have any quick, small, energetic exercises they would like to do to bring us into alignment? If not, I'll do one.
The quickest one I know of, Josh, is the quiet touch and reset breath.
Let's do it. I'm open to it.
Very, very simple and straightforward. So get yourself into a nice, relaxed position. Left hand over the heart, right hand over the left. Okay, left hand over the heart, right hand over the left. And normal out breath through the mouth, normal in breath through the nose, and then a full and complete out breath through the mouth, all the way. It's just that simple. And that just helps to rebalance your three brains in your body. The one under your hands, the one between your ears, and the one below your stomach. Such an easy thing to use anytime you feel you're getting out of balance.
Thank you, Mike. We won't have time today. I do want to say hi to our new guests, Stephen and Brady. We won't have time today for full introductions, and we're also recording this. So this is going to be something that we can share with others as they come into the fold and they're able to listen to the explanation. Luckily, each agreement that we're going over is very short, and we'll all have a chance to give our input on that. And we can make in the future introduction videos, short ones, and if there's a place that we can post those, so that every time someone's watching a recording, they don't have to watch the same introductions of people they already know over and over. We do have a place for that, and I'm also open to collective resource spots that we can use for something like that for our videos. If you have something like that, throw it in the chat. So I want to start with a little context. The feeling that I think would go best along with this call is one of peace and understanding. We all want to have a full body yes to everything we're agreeing to. Our heads are very powerful, and so are our hearts. They say our hearts are 5,000 times more electromagnetically strong. Yet our heads can produce systems that can reach throughout the world and actually produce, we can create systems that can actually produce what we want to encompass in a feeling, or can bring a feeling or an intention to life within that system. And we've all grown up in this system that's been created, that's been rooted from bringing the intention to the world of forced slavery and control. And I wish I could say it prettier. And so what we have is the opportunity here to create a new story, create a new system, and a new agreement field. And the beginning of our country, as we stepped into this already discovered country, as the settlers came over, and they knew that they had to create something that would unite them, which did work. It did unite them. They created this agreement field, and it eventually turns into a culture. And so now we know, our kids just grow up with this. They learn the pieces of the agreement field that they need to learn. And of course, there's giant law books and law books and law books of all kinds of laws or agreements that were that were that were created for us. And so this is our chance in a decentralized fashion to create our own agreements that bypass all countries and their agreement fields, and actually can bring us into a collective agreement field that will be used that can be used, in how I see it, that can be used as we step into these decentralized villages and training centers and activation centers and cities even. These agreement fields can help us work together, even with the currency. When we walk into another country, we have another agreement field, we have another currency, and that currency supports that agreement field. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. So what I've found in leading these agreement calls, and I have led a few, not calls, but I've led a few actual meetings, and if anyone has a better solution to what I'm saying, please say so. And what I'll do is I'll just run through what's worked for me. Saying yes and. So instead of like no and blocking the energy, saying yes and. If you need to even say that, the best thing is to ask questions and clarify. And so as we go through the agreements, instead of saying no to anything, you just say, well, what about, clarify what you need to clarify. And then basically if everyone agrees on something, then we'll a full body yes, and they're fully understood, then we'll move to the next. If there's someone that does not agree on it, what we'll ask is that person or persons get together and create an alternative solution to whatever issue this agreement is solving, until we can come to a solution that we all agree on. We want these to be very universal, so much like a country, super universal, so it can include everyone that's heading towards the same vision of this new earth. And then instead of grouping the next set of agreements under it to states and counties and countries, we actually just go straight to the actual space. So from universal to where we're all heading towards the same goal, and then the next agreement field will be a space agreement, and that I can help people set up in their specific spaces. And so we'll know before we enter these spaces exactly what to expect, so that alignment process will happen before we won't have to get there and have misalignment, and it'll start being able to happen across a larger field and across space and time. I would like if someone can volunteer to record the names of the people that show onto the call. And also if they could put, I don't know if I have to send you the agreements or not, but if you could put who, if anyone says no to an agreement, or no to agreement basically, then, or if they're not saying yes, then if they could record who that is. Does anyone want to volunteer to be able to record the people? Is anyone able to do that? Because I won't be able to administer it.
Yeah, I'll do that, mate, if you like.
All right, thank you, Mike.
I'll just throw them in the chat window, so the chat will need to be saved afterwards, otherwise that record will be lost.
Okay. Okay, is that so? I guess then we could have to, I probably should have numbered the agreements. We also have the recording of the call to go by. Um, that sounds good enough. I think that'll work for now. If anyone else has something, so the purpose is let me just set the context so you can get a very clear picture, that afterwards we can contact everyone that and ask for that proposal. So they would propose a separate solution to whatever that issue that's fixing. And in the future, everyone, by the way, everyone has the opportunity to come up with any agreements. As long as we all agree on them, it'll be universal. Otherwise, you can implement that agreement in any space you want at any time. But if it's not universal, if everyone's not really like with it, then we need to figure out what everyone is with. So we're all in agreement. We're not forced into it. And then if someone falls out of that agreement field, like if they're not updating, or if they haven't been in the agreement field for a while, and they're wanting access to, let's say, the currency, or to maybe a shared database, or any kind of access that there's specific agreements around, they would need to update, make sure that they're caught up. Okay, we can reword something together. So if there's an agreement that could be worded better, totally open to doing that on the call, so we can have a solid agreement. And we're not in a hurry, but we also don't want to discuss agreements. We just want to have proposals. And if you want some clarification, if I'm ever losing you on anything, raise your hand. And if you don't have I think everyone has video capability but one person. If you don't, I can stop. It's best if you can raise your hand for clarity on anything. And if not, I'll stop and I'll give a small second for anyone to speak up at certain times. And this is one of those times we're actually going to jump into the declaration now. Does anyone have any other clarification questions on the intro? Mike?
Yeah, quick question. Just a couple of people have come up with, it doesn't have your name necessarily on the window here. So I'm just sending you private messages. If you can check the chat and just drop your name in so I can get your name recorded properly for the call, that would be much appreciated.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much. All right. And so I didn't hear, is there anything, there's one person that not able to raise their hand. Anyone else have anything for clarification, or should we jump right in? Hey, Stephen. Okay. All right, let's go through the agreements here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share with you guys so you can see. This will make it nice and easy for everyone. All right, I think that'll work. Now I can't see you raising your hand, but if there is, I can't see everyone. So these are short agreements, so we'll just have a chance at the end to look at them all together. Okay, so agreement number one. I agree to all organizational, group, and relation agreements I enter into. It has a little excerpt below it, which says, means we're all going to understand the rules of the game before playing from now on. So what this does is it's just saying if I'm entering into agreement that I'm aware of that and I'm agreeing to it. Super simple, super big, super starting point. And what I'll allow, since I can't see everyone raise their hand, I'm going to look through you guys. I don't see anyone with their hand raised. But if you don't agree, raise your hand or speak up. And if not, I'll assume it's a whole body yes and you're fully clear. Okay, so that's a whole body yes. Everyone's fully clear on that. Do you think that's the best way? I really, it's nice to have on this first one, maybe everyone could say yes. Does everyone like do a thumbs up? Would be nice to see that. Do a thumbs up if you agree with that. Okay, it looks like everyone. Jen, did you agree with that? Jen Hillman? And understand it? I didn't. Jen? Jen Hillman? Did you understand that first one and agree with it?
Yeah, are you not seeing my posts in the chat window?
Oh, no, I don't see the chats. Okay, let me look at the chat. I don't have access to chat right now. I only have access to my
Okay,
screen.
I'll monitor that. I'll monitor that for you, Josh.
Okay. You want to help co-facilitate? That'd be great, Mike. Yes.
Sure, no props. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we're good. Okay. And so, yes, if you have any clarification, you can also chat window, and Mike will let us know. Just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay. So number 2, and I'll explain this one. No group or individual relationship agreements overrides the universal agreements. This means that you can't say, hey, well, we made a specific agreement over here, so that overrides, if everyone in a group is under the same agreement field and understanding of something, and then someone makes a side deal that can't override that. That's what that means. Oh, I can see the chat. Okay, you got thumbs up. Great. Any questions on that one, or any questions or rewording or unclarity, or anyone want to create another proposal for that? Okay, and then I don't see anyone yet or hear anyone. So if anyone does, say something, and you can always say something. There's never too late. I don't want to put.
Hey, Josh, sorry,
Yeah.
I was on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could go over an example for that, because as I understand what you're saying, and so far I agree with what I understand, is we have universal agreements, and then we'll have like small group agreements, which could be for communities or whatever whole on sides we're talking about. So small group agreements don't override the universal agreements, which I immediately see as a safety factor, so that if people are traveling around or whatever, they understand the universal agreements and they aren't suddenly like going to jail or whatever for something that they didn't understand. I was wondering if you could maybe give an example of both situations for how you came up with that, or however whoever came up with that.
Great. Okay. Yes. And I think I'm glad I'm so super glad. This is really good. I like questions because this clarifies everything. So this is only an agreement field. It's only it's kind of like being in a country. You adhere to the country's laws. Okay. In this case, it's not a law, and it's an agreement. And there could be something that says, well, if not, then what? Like if I don't follow this agreement, then what? You're in a community space. The agreement is, let's just say, do your dishes, and you make a side agreement with someone saying, hey, we don't have to do our dishes. I mean, it could be anything like that. It's just that simple is what this means. These aren't going to necessarily follow you around. Like when you go out into the old world or the matrix, you're playing by those rules. So, but when you're in a place, a container, they call it a container. So when you're in a place with 100% people that are within the same understanding, like a space might say, you have to have this currency to enter this space, plus maybe fiat currency, plus maybe a space currency, which I can explain to you. And actually, it's probably best I explain it to you now. An example of a space currency, we want to make sure that the currencies we're using are free from corruption, first of all, and follow our follow our intention, so that they help us, reach our goal, and so we don't want to really have a space agreement that a space currency that actually is its own currency that's financially tied to the dollar. Whenever you tie to the dollar, you're automatically corrupting it, because investors can come in and just make a bunch of money and everyone's their slave. That's why it's like that to produce slavery. So as we have our space agreements might look like this. It's an energetic agreement, and some of you have heard this. It's an energetic agreement that says, I'm going to support the energy of the space. So what that looks like is, if the space is doing a meditation, and it says on the front of the space, it says, we're meditating from 4 to 6. Take your shoes off, be quiet, come in, you know, whatever, right? It's got its own space agreements to it. You would come in and say somebody was, you know, very upset, or they just wanted to like sing. Somebody would say, hey, do you realize, you know, that the space agreements are on the front door, and this is a quiet meditation space. We've all agreed on it. That's what everyone here wants. And if that person, you know, continued to say, I don't care, they say, do you realize you're going to lose your currency, your level 3 currency that's tied to the actual space? You know, you've agreed to be in this space, whether they're the steward or whatever, you know, and if they continue, of course, they would lose that currency only comes at the end of the day, and it's not savable. You can't save up with it. So they would actually, because they're not respecting the agreements of that space would be able to say, hey, you have to go. You haven't paid your space currency, you know, the currency that we require, that you know, you're keeping the flow of energy. You're keeping with your agreements. It's very similar. It's the same thing. And so on a universal field, this is just very vague. They're not going to be quite as enforceable in general, but they will. Every space it will be tied to leaving a space, and we can keep record of that if someone's breaking the universal agreements. We can, you know, that's all to be determined in the future. Does that clarify that for you, or do you still have a question on that, Stephen?
Yeah, I think I understand now. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else want clarity? We all agree that we can't override universal with relationship or specific agreements. And by the way, relationship agreements cannot be covered. We can't really like help someone with their relationship agreements if they're not doing them within. We can give them a formula, but it's not really like it's their deal. You know, it's like above our reach. Okay, this one I put in red because I'm not really clear on it. I'm going to read it for now, but I don't want to implement it yet. Space agreements can override universal agreements with clear labeling and separate currency. So what that means is if a space says, we're going to have a party tonight, we're releasing all the agreements, we're just going to have a party and do whatever you want. Of course they can do that. Just don't just say, clearly label it, and then make sure you're not charging the universal currency to be there, that it's not mixed up with that, because it's not in the same agreement field, right? So they would be stepping into a new agreement field. And so we don't want that to happen too often, because it does get confusing. We want to kind of keep our intentions and keep with what we're all heading towards. And it's an experiment, right? So we get to do what we want also. Okay. Okay. Spaces. I agree to do my best to leaving spaces better than I found them. Does everyone understand and agree to that? Super basic, simple stuff. I mean, super simple. Okay, next one. I'm going to go through them a little quicker. Leaving should be leave. I don't know what that means. I agree to honor the general agreements made at specific spaces. So this is just, once again, it's a little bit of a reiteration. But it's saying if you're going to be representing the universal agreement field, and you've got a currency you've built up, and you're able to access a space that's also understanding that you're a trusted member that's been trained to be there, and they've got their own space agreements, that you've read those agreements before you show up and you agree to them. So that's what that's saying. Okay. So, leaving should be leave. I do my best. Okay, I see what you're saying. I thought you were saying, I agree to do my best to leave spaces. I agree with that. Everyone, okay. So I agreed to leave spaces better than I found them. Thank you. Everyone agrees to that? Okay. I agree to honor the general agreements made at specific spaces. That's what, yeah, I already went over that. As a steward of a space, okay, so how this looks is in the very soon future, we're going to have an organization, or everything's an agreement field. Even organizations, when you get into an organization, it's a long set of agreements. So once we have a separate agreement field for our organization, we're actually working together, we're sharing income or whatever that looks like, or we're sharing finances and work and time. That's a separate from the universal, for sure. We don't want to confuse that at all with the universal agreements. And so when you're stewarding a space, for now, it might look like someone owns a piece of land, but they're in the agreement field. So they're working with us like a retreat leader. And so for now, we can go spend this currency going to their retreat and hanging out, and they might have some currency that we give them in order for improvements for the retreat, so that they are getting something out of it too. And we can decide how much that is and how that looks. I was thinking like 50,000 each retreat center, and then they're on the agreement field, and we get to go there and help them out. Posting should be post. I agree to post all space. Okay, great. So as a steward of a space, this means that you either are in the organization that we all, let's just say that we end up with an organization, and we have a funding model that's able to fund and repeat, villages. Then our stewards are going to be within our circle. But for now, we might have a steward that's also an owner of a space. So until we're all in the same organization and in the same, then we're going to have people in different owners of land and businesses. And they can still be stewards. Okay, so that's that. I agree to post all space agreements to those who would enter before arrival, and outside of each space on the door or easily accessible for those entering to read. So if you're stewarding a space and you're in an agreement field and you have your own agreements you want people to adhere to, you're agreeing that you're going to show them to people before they arrive to your space so they know what they're getting into, and that you're agreeing to putting them on the door. And what can happen is you can lose access to the currency and the network if you're not keeping your agreements as a steward. Does everyone think that's fair? Does anyone have questions? Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. I like your thumbs up. It makes me feel better. Okay, the next one. As a steward of a space, I agree I will not change any space agreements while others are present without their consent. Meaning, if others have already agreed to an agreement, they're there under that preposition, under that presumption, they're following what they think, you can't just change them unless everyone decides to do that together, because and going through whatever process that would be. But I would say that they've agreed to it, so they've showed up so that they would need to agree to changing it. Otherwise, it's not cool. Okay. And I'm just going to pause before I go to the next one, and I'm going to assume a yes to all these. And I know that these are very agreeable because we've already gone through them with like 14 people, and these have all been pretty logical. And each agreement, by the way, if anyone's making their own agreements and they're helping pitch in, they've got to be very specific. It's kind of like a law. It's got to be very specific. It can't say, I agree to being happy, or I agree to being always smiling. It can't be vague like that. Or always doing my best. It's like, that's not an agreement. That's more of a rule to live by. Okay, as a steward of a space, I agree that if I do not honor the agreements, that I may have to leave the space, have my role filled by another, or lastly, the space, if they're the owner, may lose access to the currency program initiated by the Universal Agreement Network and the Full Potential Alliance. I'm calling it the Universal Agreement Network. That's just whatever that is. It's not really anything. Full Potential Alliance is actually a consortium of new paradigm companies. which in the future I see as being a part as we design these governance apps and currency apps that we're designing. These are going to plug in with all of this, by the way. All right. So does everyone understand and agree to that one? So it's protecting the users, the end users, from a tyrant space holder that's a steward that's not honoring the agreements that themselves. Okay.
Actually,
yeah.
I do have a question. Just on that last line, it says, the space may lose access to the currency program. Is that like the space being the whole collective of people that are part of that space, or I who am not honoring the agreements?
Mm-hmm. That would only be in the case of an owner of a property. Only when there's an owner of a property and that they're saying, I'm not going to follow the rules and I'm going to do what I want, and then everyone that shows up from the collective would be dishonored, and they wouldn't be able to, like, there would be no integrity there. And so if they own the space and they're not willing to let their role be filled, it would go through a process. So first it'd be like, well, can someone else fill that role for you? Because, or either whether it's temporarily, or can we have some training or a discussion? There would be obviously a lot of things before you get to that point. But if it was just came down to it, yeah, then that's what would happen.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, cool. We get to make all those details up, but we don't want to get too complex. Like, we don't want to have law books either. We want to keep it very flowy, right? Okay. Stewards in the space can come in the form of groups or individuals. Okay. So it's leaving it open for now.
I have a question, Josh.
You've got a question.
Okay, 2 questions.
Yeah, you've got a question from Malian.
Malian, hey.
Hey, I put a question in the chat. Hold on. I'm trying to get back to the chat so that I can read it. Maybe I can
read it.
Okay, yeah. Can you read it out loud? Because my app is a little squirrely right now.
Okay. Can there be more than one steward, like owner and manager? And can we create different levels or types of decisions for different stewards? So decisions are not necessarily tied to the universal agreements. That's an organizational agreement. I have a write-up on that. I don't know if you want to see it now. I guess I could show it to you now. That explains this.
Or maybe you can just sum up in a couple of sentences what the interest is for that, and then forward it later.
Okay, yes, that sounds great. Yes. So can there be more than one steward? Yes. The answer is yes. Okay. And can we create different types of decisions? That would not fall into the universal.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. These are very vague, just all-encompassing agreements that are just, they change very slowly because it's universal. Yeah, and they're just very, very all-encompassing. Okay. If a group, okay, and so you guys got this one. If a group's stewarding a space, oh no, you didn't. If a group is stewarding a space, it must make all space agreements together, unless a member cedes their right to be in the decision process. It should be in writing, and they should come up again to be able to decide with the group if they choose, no more than 3 months time spans. This is very specific, and I'm totally open to rewording this one. I mean, all of them are open at any time to rewording. We're doing this together. So, or they can request to be back in for possible approval before a date. So what is this saying? This is saying if a group decides to steward a space together, it's got to make all the agreements together, right? So like, but what if a member says, well, I don't want to be, I'm in the group, I'm here, but I don't really want to deal with like creating the agreements for whatever reason. They just don't want to do it. They want to cede their right. They should say that specifically. That way they don't come in later and go, hey, but I didn't have a choice. But then they miss the meeting, then they have to go back and do it again. And, so it's like, if they're not going to be in it, they're not going to be in it, and they should say, but they shouldn't go like, I'm never going to be in it. They should be able to say, I'm not going to be in it for 2 weeks, or, you know. And then if they don't put a time span, we would say like, you know, 3 months is a lot. Then they need to or maybe every month or week they should check in and say, I'm still wanting to stay out of the decisions. So I don't know. I think time spans are really silly, to be honest with you. I think we should take this whole part out here.
I think you should take that out then, Josh. Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Because the other thing is then, you know, for example, let's look at someone who just, you know, at the moment, I don't quite understand, but I don't feel comfortable in participating in a decision. Then I think it's easier and simpler and more straightforward for them just to say, all right, I've had to think about it now, and actually I've got a suggestion I want to put forward. So it keeps the whole thing very flexible. But it also means that there's no sort of compulsion on time limits and stuff like that. So that's just what I would suggest for that is the simplest possible route is normally the best route, and the most inclusive route is the best route as well.
I like that. So I'm modifying this agreement that I've got here as a proposal.
I think what you've got now is perfect.
I do too. And this morning something actually came to me that goes along with this. I just want to say it really quick. Is you know, I see it possible to have an online way of being able to have people involved. So if they're not on this call, for example, they would be able to see this video and be able to say yes to everything. And if they have a no before they enter the agreement field, you know, they would have a chance to do another proposal, and you know, but or add one. And so we got to decide how complicated this gets, because at this point, I think after like a certain amount of people get on this, we're not going to want to have to keep updating and voting on stuff that we've already agreed on. So I think that, you know, these first agreements are gonna stay really solid, and we can still have a thread that comes up maybe like once every 2 weeks or something that allows us to look at that online. And if someone shows to the meeting, great. And if not, you can see what the updated agreements are. And if you want clarity, you can go to the video. Do you guys understand that? So it's like we can all be a part of the process without having to show up to a call. And so it won't get updated. It's a very slow process. It's going to stay the same until we're all on the same page. It's just that simple. It can't keep changing. It's got to these are big universal agreements. If everyone's on the same page with changing something, then it'll change. And until that time, so it's the good thing about being early on these calls is you get full participation in this creation.
And,
Okay.
you know, I think we should trust that the people who are supposed to show up are showing up, and that it's all working towards the highest, for sure.
Hey, may I add something?
Yes.
All right. So the way another way I see this going too is these agreements can be open source, where anybody's allowed to copy them, etc. So the way I envisioned community evolution happening is we have a group of people participating in the space at whatever level, and then the group may realize we want to try something different. That's either when they make their own space or potentially make their own universal agreements. They go somewhere else, do that, and that allows, and we should encourage this type of experimentation where they go to a new space, create their new agreements, and we can see how that happens. So it's highly experimental without having to revise an established communities or an established groups thing. They just go and create another one, and are encouraged to do so, because all of us have a lot of conditioning that we're coming from all the different cultures, and only through experimentation will we really realize what's going to be ideal.
I fully agree with that. What do you guys think? That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think I would encourage people just to bring their awareness to that, because it's good in principle, but the issue is that without a clear intention, for example, you've got a problem. Without an inclusive structure, you've got a problem, and without a process about how you either avoid disagreements coming up, or you have ways of deciding things, then that also creates a problem. And the issue then is that they become like invisible tripping points or black holes that people can drop into. So, and the thing is, people have so little. There are so many really terrible examples of organization, even in conscious communities and stuff like that, that I think that the awareness should be, okay, an organization that has efficacy on a collective level built into it and on an individual level should have a clear intention. It should have a structure that includes people, and it should have processes for discussion and decision. And the danger in that is that if people aren't aware of that, and that they can start off with something like this and change it as they go along as well, is that if you build if you like a stool without those three legs supporting it, then the danger is that what happens is that is a very readily perceived vacuum, and people can then step in, bring in their control issues and ego and stuff like that, and I've seen it. So I just wanted to say that point. That's a reason, and I would be tempted to put the function of intention, structure, and process right to the fore as being, a key. Why do we do this? A structure is there to include everybody. A process is there so that we have a way of deciding things and changing things if we need to. And the intention is to make a place where everyone is valued, everyone can be comfortable, everyone can have their say, and we can adapt ourselves as things go along. Just as a quick sort of example.
Cool. Thank you, Mike. I just want to say something really quick, Stephen. So we definitely want to say yes and. So I think that was started out with. So I think what Stephen was saying is that I think you guys are saying the same thing. And what it is the organizational agreements get tighter as they get into an organization and decision making and all that. And for this time, it's a consensus. So how that looks is a consensus. Right now, we all have to be a full body yes. Otherwise, we don't agree to it, and we're not in the agreement field. And so for this call and for these calls, everyone's a full body yes. And like Stephen said, he actually clarified what I was thinking. It's everyone's a full body yes, and nothing's going to get updated until everyone's a full body yes on updating it. In other words, it's not even really, it's better to split off if you don't agree with what everyone has already agreed on. Updating it's really like, I think there should be a process for that. And yes, I would love to see that, Mike, like that process for updating. And for now, since it is far in the future, let's go for step one, which is just creating these, and let's not change them yet. Let's not open them to change for a good while. And if it does, let's make sure that that's flow. Yeah. Does anybody have anything to say to complete that frame I'm talking on? But does anybody want to say anything?
Yeah, I do. I was raising my hand, but I'm excited by this conversation because it seems like we've actually got like a little area where some real opportunities are to explore more, because I think I see really both. I think that consensus and the whole project is about building a consensus reality that includes all the people on the planet, and that's a beautiful goal. It's an important goal. And at the same time, I think that, traditionally why that consensus has failed is because of bottlenecks of decision making. So if we this group that's here right now creates these agreements, and we have this, first of all, we're all speaking in English, like imagine, imagine I'm my family's from Indonesia, so imagine there's people who are like Indonesian Muslims, have a totally different set of agreements and expectations of culture, and they're not used to being heard. And it's very intimidating to come into a space where you don't speak the language or you don't have the same cultural expectations. And then the whole community of those people that you're trying to connect with is already on the same page. And so we want to create a structure, and I think you've hit it right on the head, Josh. You want to create a structure and a process for that type of integration, that type of conversation to happen. And that's probably a deeper question.
Nice, thank you. All right, let's take a second and just process and reflect. Feel where your breath is, kind of like we did in the beginning of the call. It would be really nice, and I didn't do this in the beginning of the call, but it would be really nice to set a recentering exercise where we all can achieve the same exact focus, the same exact breath, and be able to come back there together, to come back to unity. So for now, we don't know what that looks like, but let's use what we did at the beginning of the call, where we just checked in with our breath, maybe reflect or process on whatever's on your mind, and then come back to the intention of what we're creating here together, and root into the earth, and see that earth connecting us all. And we want peace and understanding. So does anybody have anything else that they want understood on the I believe what we're talking about in this frame is the broad context, just kind of getting on the same context, I believe is what this frame is before we move forward with the agreements. Is there anyone else that needs any clarity on anything? No? Okay. I'm checking the chat. No one says, okay. All right, let's move on. So, stewards, I'm going to mute someone because I hear fuzz. Okay, thanks. Okay. Okay. As a space coordinator or steward, I agree to always trying to leave an available space where people can unplug and relax. This is always a good option for those that don't have the energy to participate for any reason or need solace. So it's kind of like being in a car with someone that's super hyper and someone that's tired. It's like, or you're on a different flow. You always want to have two spaces. So as a space coordinator, it's always good to have, let's activate and play the game, but if someone's not feeling it, instead of them disrupting the game, having a place to go reflect, recharge. Everyone agree? Okay, got it. Next. Renegotiations. While I agree to all the above, I remain open to change or adapt agreements, and will call a meeting for this purpose and follow the agreement process in changing or negotiating agreements. So this agreement process is not, it's whatever that agreement process is. So following the process that has been agreed upon by everyone. And so, as we said, we can dive into that. For now, we're gonna create these agreements, and we'll go one proposal at a time. We have to do proposals. We can't discuss it online. It becomes too crazy. We have to have proposals for these things. And Mike said he's going to do one of those. So that's, and anyone that wants to get with him can get with him. And I would like to get with you too, Mike, on that, because that's a whole process. Is everyone good with that? Okay. I agree that on any updating or during the process of formation of the universal agreements, I will respond to any updates made and or attend any calls needed to get a clear picture of any new agreement that is agreed upon. Okay, this I'm taking out, guys, because this was here before we're going for much more flow. This is part of this process. This was like a very strict process at first, and I don't think it needs to be that crazy. So I'm taking that out. Okay. Don't worry about that. Community property. I agree to return community property in the same or better condition within agreed upon time frame. Space for schedule agreements clearly posted. So what that means is if you have a community property and you're using it within the agreements that say you can use it, you're agreeing to return it. Kind of like not a problem. Yes, that's fine. You can always do what you need to do, and then you can come back, listen. Okay, sounds good, Mike. Okay. I will be watching the chat, and feel free to open your mic and speak. I'll pause at the end of every agreement. I agree to return property in the same or better condition within the time frame. Pretty simple. Everyone got it? Whole body yes? Okay. I agree if I'm leaving any personal property in a community room or other, let's take that out, it's vague, then I am automatically allowing all community members to use that property unless it specifically provides the use of personal property. So this is saying, if I'm going into a community space, I'm under the assumption that I can use the guitar because it's sitting there, or use the piano, or whatever, because this is a community space, and we're stewarding and sharing whatever's in that space. Now, if it says, it's a work center, then you're bringing your computer, it would say that. Otherwise, you're assuming you can use something that's in the space. Obviously, if it's in a backpack or something, that'd be, maybe different. Maybe we could label stuff like that could be possible too. So this is saying that if it's not labeled, it's there. You are assuming it's community property. It's in the community space. That doesn't get confusing.
I think that is fair, but I also think that this agreement should say something about like leaving that item in the space. So, if I see the guitar there and I want to use it, I can use it, but I need to leave it there and not like take it back to my room or something.
Okay. Yep. Okay. That comes up next. Right here.
I may add to that?
Yeah, it does come up, but go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I think also with our technology, it'd be really good to actually have things like with a code on them or whatever, so that it is clearly labeled as community property. There's so many people coming from old paradigm that's going to be something that's going to be really hard for a lot of people. So if things are clearly labeled community and have a barcode on them so they can be scanned and you know where it goes, like that's my idealistic. But I don't know. I mean, it's fine. I just think that there needs to be a little bit of room, because certain areas people are going to bring stuff, and if it's always the de facto that it's up for grabs, that could be really confusing, because most of us absentmindedly leave things sometimes.
Yeah. So let's do it. Let's keep it like this. So we're not getting proposals mixed in with, because you're proposing something new. So the protocol for the call in the beginning was ask questions for clarification. But if you have something that's not sitting with you, you can just say no to it. You can say no and come up with your own proposal. So we don't have to say yes to this. you can put a question mark, or you can ask a question, and we can also reword something. But if it's a whole new, like that's a whole new way of doing it, then we would say, you would say no, and we would mark your name down, and then you would create another proposal, and we would all decide. I mean, everyone's going to have to decide what they want, or then we become two universal fields. If that's when it's like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just really quickly rephrase that as I understand it, that should be a space proposal, not a universal proposal.
Okay, that's fair. I agree that community spaces, all property is considered community property, may have agreement attached to it. Okay. Yeah. Let's put it in. Let's say space agreement, and that's fair to say at any moment, guys. It's too specific. Let's keep that as a space agreement, and so this will be a suggested space agreement. As we so then okay, I'm just gonna make it, oh gosh, okay, I don't know how to make it a different color. You know how to make it a different color? I think that would be in format text. Hold on. I'm just going to underline it. That's the easiest. Okay.
It's over to the right, Josh.
Oh,
if you go over to
hidden.
the menu bar to the right,
Oh gosh.
all the way down,
Okay.
all on the right of your screen, there's like a bold, italic, and then the color.
I see it. It was hidden. Thanks. Okay. Cool. All right. Standard protocol for community property. 1, I agree to return the item to where it was when I found it before leaving the space, unless otherwise posted. So that answers your thing, Jen. 2, I agree to be a steward of the property and make sure the property is returned in the same or better condition than when I found it. So that's for the property, not steward of the space, steward of the property. In other words, you're taking care of it. We can reword that better if you want, but that's how it's worded right now. 3, I agree that I can pick up and use any item in the space without permission unless otherwise posted. So this is giving us a general assumption. What we're creating is a culture that's saying, okay, it's a community space, it's not a private space, and defining those different spaces and saying, okay, in this space I can do this, and then if it's not that, then it, you know. And so, like you said, we may leave that for the spaces. You guys get to decide this. I will not grab community property from others, but may ask if the property has a specific use. That use will be posted and used accordingly. So it might be nice to have these kind of things, though, Stephen, when people show up, because then there's this understanding. But I'm open to putting that on pause also, and talking about that. Maybe we can just talk about that, Stephen. I guess if anyone doesn't see, do you see that, Stephen, as a space agreement also, because it's in the same vein? Do you see this as a space agreement also, or do you see that as a universal, Stephen?
I'm sorry. Okay, if I heard you right, the way I see it is as a space agreement instead of universal, because different spaces are going to have different things. So some spaces will be community, some spaces can be more private, but I think when it comes to property, having done the experiments we've done, been in different communities I've been in, property is really a touchy subject. So those should be clearly stated in spaces. So you know that when you enter this space, everything you bring there has a chance to become a community property, or could be by somebody else. And there's also, of course, almost contradictions in what was just written there about returning something. For example, say I bring something into a space, I step out absentmindedly, leaving that there, then somebody else walks into that space, sees it, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to use this for a while. They walk away with it. Now I come back to go get my thing. It's not there anymore. I have no idea where it is. I accidentally left it. Now I'm old paradigm. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's stolen or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think it needs to be a space agreement because
Okay.
there's. Okay.
Totally. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I get you. I see it. Okay. Modifying that. Let's put that on the space. I'll still have a talk. I'll still want to talk with you about that. Or let's get some. Let's get that going together if you're willing to, Stephen. Are you?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I'm gonna mark that. There's a lot of chat. I don't know. I guess that's where we're marking it. I'm gonna mark my own notes. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Events. I agree to participate in events I've signed up for and commit to giving my full love and devotional energy to the event for collective success. Our devotion to the collective vision is directly correlated to our participation. So, okay, I just want to give a disclaimer. Commit my full love and devotional energy is not very measurable. I agree to participate is. So what it's saying is, if you're saying, you know, I'll show up to weekly meetings and you're not showing up, or you're going, you know, it's kind of, it's trying to solve that problem. And I'm also open to someone saying, you know, no, let me come up with another proposal, and us, you know, or however that looks, co-creating this one. But what it solves, the problem we want to solve is people not being integral, not showing up, not communicating. And so how we have that here is, I agree to participate in events I've signed up for. And if you guys feel resonant with it and a whole body yes, then let's just say yes. And if there's anyone that has anything they want to say.
So Josh, are you saying that you're going to take out some of those words?
I'm kind of like speaking out loud. Yeah, we can. Or what do you think? Yeah, we can reframe it for sure.
I really like the idea of being concise.
Yep. It's vague.
Hey, Josh.
Let's reframe it before we agree on it then. Hello?
Yeah, this is Ian Luthringer. Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, Ian, for sure.
Okay. Well, two things. One, thanks a lot for setting this all up and going through this. This is my first time joining this group. But I'm just looking at this, and to start, I'll just give a quick 3-minute analysis of what I'm seeing, and then I have to jump off and run to a hearing.
Okay.
But my lawyer brain going, to start off with the definition section, you have a lot of verbiage in here that's undefined because it's really tied to this new culture.
Mm-hmm.
Even the use of the word space. We know that there's a lot more to it than simply an area that you're functioning within, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be great to see a definition section hitting some of the defined terms. And then also, removing subjectivity, right? These, you know, full love and devotion, I'm in, you know, everything you've said so far is definitely in line with where I'm at. And I would love to live in this place and participate in it. But to be universal, you need to remove subjectivity. So scanning through the entire thing and removing all subjective terms and making them objective. And then just a rewrite from a linguistic perspective so that there's not redundant words and that every word has meaning, and that it is not actually ambiguous, right, or vague, which is all just part of the drafting. I know once you get these laid out, you can go back and redraft each provision and make it concise and make sure the vagueness and ambiguity is removed, and handle all that. And I would love to see that. If you'd like to share this document, I would love to go through it at some point and you know, provide some notes on it that you can use. And also to integrate it into what we're doing with the International Blockchain Regulatory Alliance to make sure that all these agreements and the underlying principles that are behind them are integrated into the principles of decentralization that are being built into the IBRA. Because there's definitely an alignment here, and I'd like to make that happen with you guys.
All right, that's awesome.
And with
Sounds
that, I
great.
got to jump off because I got to get.
Okay, Ian.
So
All right.
looking forward to another call though soon with everyone.
Okay, thanks, Ian. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Great. Good advice. Yeah. So in case you guys don't know, Ian is a former corporate lawyer who's helping decentralization rules around the blockchain and helping us keep our sovereignty and decentralization on the legal front. Okay. Next one. I agree that in any shared space, the event with the most participants will get the larger room, stage, or venue, unless otherwise agreed upon. But it should always really get it. It's kind of like Burning Man. It's like if you have a very successful event and people are showing up, then you would get, this especially is going to be adopted like in, let's say, a futuristic city or green city. So does everyone agree to that? This is assuming shared property, that we're not ownership. We're stepping out of the ownership model, and we're not paying for stuff to push others
Josh,
aside. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
We're building a green city in Las Vegas, and we already creating our own constitution. It's considered a universal agreement. If it overlaps with yours, how would that work?
I mean, we'll have a finished product here very soon. In fact, we're going to do a wrap up and continue these, for the next call soon, because I have a little wrap up that we need to do. How this would fit in?
Yeah, because we already have a city would already have our constitution, and you bring in your universal agreement. Some things overlap, or does it conflicting?
Delphi. You're talking about Delphi?
What's Delphi?
You're not talking about Delphi Village?
No, actually, we're building a city, entire city, and it's a decentralized, autonomous city built on the blockchain in Las Vegas. It's a new city that we're building with our association, the Nevada Blockchain Association. No, something different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that would just take us getting in alignment. Without alignment, there would be no agreements, right? So we have to, get alignment, create those agreements together. I mean, the way that I like to work is a whole body yes. I don't want to be forced in any agreement. I don't think anyone else does either. I think we're done with that paradigm. I think we need to know what we're stepping into, the rules of the game. We don't want the game to change. We don't want people to be playing unfair and manipulating it and forcing us to do stuff. So we want to keep those energies out of it. As long as it's super clear, people have time to spend to actually do it right, I'm all for it.
Because when you're entering the city has their own constitution, so you have to abide by those constitutions because you're entering that space, right?
Okay, great. Okay, I see what you're saying. So yes, if you have laws, then this may or may not work. But if you have your own agreement field for a city, it's like this. If this was a city, let's say, and these were the universal agreements in the city, and then each space had their own agreements. So these are very universal. We would match our universal agreements, and then each, how I see it, at least each space can have, yoga from 4 to 7. This is this type of yoga. This is laughing yoga or whatever, right? And so you can have a specific space agreements that people can make, and then I mean, it's got to be a match. So it would take us, I guess, just matching it. The way I see it, it's a very vague universal set. We would probably be, what we can do is we could possibly, it's really, the currency does have a lot to do with it, and the network. So if they're very, very, very similar, we could possibly figure out how we could jump and exchange back and forth if they're not exactly the same. They so we could just talk and work together a little closer on that and see how that looks.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, because having a city runs very differently from from just a small space, because you're talking about multiple spaces and also tourists coming in and out of the city. So it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know if you know, but I had for the last 13 years, I had a project, Green Earth City. So I've had a whole design. You can go to greenearthcity.com and see some of the design aspects, you know, of the systems. But there's a lot more to it, of course, than just those systems. But I'll speak to you on that later. Shannon?
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you very much, David Cam, for bringing in the concept of the city. Because when we're talking about universal agreements, and in those universal agreements, we're talking about whether hosting an event from now on include a full description of the agreement field for the space-time. I mean, I think we're actually getting a little too particular, and I think that the space agreement, the list of space agreements that you've been talking about is a second document, Josh?
Yes, that's definitely, yes. That will
Yeah.
be, I will complete that with each space if they want.
And I think that what we need here in the universal agreements is an acknowledgement of that document rather than putting them all in here. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to. I've dropped that bomb and now I have to go.
That's okay. We're wrapping up the call. There's no more agreement, so you're safe.
Thank you.
I'll send this to everyone. I'll send up what we've agreed on and maybe even the rest of them to start to look at now that we've got a context and we know how that we're going to run the calls. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.